Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I am your Oliver Shorty, and today we're going to look at Los Monstros, which I probably pronounced wrong or just got massively incorrect. And if you watched my review yesterday, I did talk about how the cover, having the same artist internally and on the cover, was kind of a cool thing, but I'd seen another one which had bugged me a little bit. That's what we're going to talk about to start with here, because the cover for Los Monstros isn't great for me. It's very stylistically done. It also weirdly looks quite flat. The colours don't really add that much to it. The city scene behind feels like it doesn't really have the perspective quite right for me, although it's an interesting scene. And there's no real dynamism or movement from it. It looks more like it's just a poster to advertise something rather than some bit of artwork that's there to tell a story. Now, the internal artwork is better, don't get me wrong, it does more of the things I want it to, but the cover on its own, with my criticism of it, isn't necessarily a bad thing, because what it actually also does is give a really good sense of the story inside. It could be done better, don't get me wrong, but I saw that cover and thought, this looks like a crime noir thing with like Universal or even earlier B-movie kind of level monsters. And it turns out that is actually what this comic book is, and I suddenly found myself a lot more interested when I started reading it. The internal artwork, as I say, is better. It has a lot more going on. It plays around with formation in little ways. There's odd little bits where guttering and paneling drops in and out of page, so it doesn't just run to the edge of it. And it feels almost like amateurish and low budget, like an 8mm film that's kind of drifted off-center a little bit. And again, that does add to the sense of what we're getting here. On top of that, it is also just really good. The action and dynamic motion is captured really effectively, especially in the early chase scene. The individual character designs are brilliant, not just for the human or human passing characters, but also the monster design. One of the things I really like that they've done here is they are fully committed to the aesthetic of B-movie monsters. Not to the point that you can see, like, seams in the costumes or zippers or anything like that, but it's as if they are just monsters who look the way they were represented in these kind of movies from this time period. And I like that. That would be the kind of thing where people, I think, would be very tempted to modernize or even to like drift away from source material. I think it makes a lot of sense because it being a crime noir story as well, it's at a certain point in American history for that to be as effective as it is, basically like 50s and 60s kind of time period, and I feel like those monsters looked right for that time. If you'd have modernized them, it would have always looked wrong anyway, but the fact that it is so in keeping with the aesthetic, it makes it even better for me. And yes, the character designs are brilliant, not just in that thing, they also look fantastic. The effort that's been put into costuming and stuff like that is fantastic, and early on we get some really nice shots of the city, and the internal artist really does get perspective. It sets up so much in terms of the feel of the place, as well as just looking great at the same time. Writing wise, it's really good as well. It is a crime noir story set in this world where there are literal monsters, and they've got an entire city, Los Monstros, not LA, but LM. And I kind of like the LA vibe they were going for. It feels very much like the place you'd expect a good, hard-boiled crime noir story to take place in. And our main character is brilliant. He does get an awful lot of good classic beats, but sometimes like mess with it just a little bit. Like his first job that we see him on is chasing him down, who's kidnapped a kid, but it's literally just a cage with a small bat in it he's carrying, and when the bat is freed, it's a vampire, and it turns out the vampire's the ones with lots of money who live up on the hills, and it's like, yeah, okay, this is kind of cool. It's setting up, he's doing world building. We get him going to a diner and going, having arrangements to go on a date with a young lady. It's really cool, and it never really falls out of what it's trying to do. I was worried there may be like an element of lazy storytelling where monsters who could not either look human or pass for human might be considered second-class citizens, or maybe the other way around, and at no point was that done. They're not playing around with that as an analogy for racism or anything like that. They're just telling this story with these characters in this world. I think there's room to play around with that to a certain degree, but they don't really have to go all that into it. Our main character is a hardball detective who used to be a cop. We get a nice little backstory about what happened to him, but for the most part, like so many things happening in this first issue, these are all interesting beats of both world and character, but mostly I feel like they're foreshadowing, and then we get him getting hired for his main job, and I love this bit because my love of noir means whenever this kind of thing happens, I instantly, like, not trusting. I don't think the guy who came in to give the job is who he says he is. I don't think the job is what he says it is. I don't think his motivation for the job is what he says it is, but it's still a fascinating look at what kind of work would be available for this character, and it's presented in such a way which adds world building without exposition. At one point, in fact, when the guy feels like the guy doing the hiring goes into a little bit more detail, the detective just cuts him off and says, yeah, I know, I live here, I don't need to be told this. And it's kind of nice that it understands this idea of a reader insert, but not to the point where it becomes out of character or weird for this kind of to be happening. Something I've criticised other writers for doing. All in all, this is a solid issue 1, and I can't wait to see how the story plays out. My love of noir probably more than the universal B-movie monster kind of thing, but I can see why fans of either would both get something they absolutely love from it, and could introduce them to other kind of storytelling, which is fantastic and would really impress them. That's it for me for now and the week. Until I see you all again, though, look after each other, everyone. Stay safe.